You later boasted that as a soldier you were trained to escape. You were facing trial on very grave charges to which you had no real defence. You also abused the trust placed in you when working in the kitchen. The fact that you seem to have been in touch with an Iranian contact during your period at large is an aggravating feature, as is the degree of planning involved. You told the jury you put the sling in place under the lorry at least a week before you escaped. It's also clear that you had some assistance. At least one person met you and provided you with £400 in cash. You did not surrender yourself. Features relevant to an assessment of the harm of this offence include the very large manhunt that resulted because of the serious underlying offences that you were charged with. This involved hundreds of police officers called away from other duties at an estimated cost of £250,000 in overtime and further costs to the border force. This was an unusual and grave situation given you were charged with offences under the Terrorism Act and the Official Secrets Act, and there was significant public concern that someone of your category had escaped. The anxiety caused to thousands of members of the public who were in the local area is to be added to the trouble caused to those whose travel was disrupted, and this also has to be taken into account. Contrary to your claim to the jury, I do not accept that you planned to hand yourself in. On the other hand, you were captured after a relatively short period, and you did not use any violence in your escape. As to mitigation, Mr. Hussein has stressed your age, both at the time of the offending and now. It is well understood today that the developmental process of the human brain continues into the third decade of life, and in general does not reach maturity until the mid-20s. This means that I'm dealing with someone who, for all your bravado and superficial capability, is still a little distance from full adult. Dr. Wood, the psychologist, found no evidence of any neurodevelopmental disorder. He assessed you as someone who feels a strong need to impress. He diagnosed narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders. Taking these in turn, they indicate a sense of entitlement, expectation of special treatment without assuming reciprocal responsibility, and someone who is untrustworthy and unreliable. You have experienced some adversities in childhood, including a lack of support from your violent and absent Lebanese father, and difficulties in your relationship with your mother, who you felt favoured your sister. You attended mainstream school and achieved 10 GCSEs. You are an attention seeker, and you enjoyed the notoriety you attracted following your escape from prison. In that context, you told Dr. Wood you didn't ever want to be just a number with no one looking at you. I have considered the sentencing offenders with mental disorders, developmental disorders, or neurological impairments guideline, but do not find that your culpability is reduced to any degree relevant to sentence by your personality disorders, which by their nature are within your ability to control. The disappointment you may have felt after your ambition to join an intelligence unit was discouraged was no justification for jeopardising national security and breaching the absolute prohibition on unauthorised contact by a member of the military with an enemy state such as Iran. You had received some plaudits early in your career, winning Best Junior Soldier in December 2020, but this was insufficient attention for your personality. I accept that at the start you may have been deceiving the Iranians, but you will soon have realised that this was insufficient to keep their interest. I accept you are not motivated by financial greed. I have in mind the purposes of sentence as set out in Section 57 of the Sentencing Act 2020. The authorities cited by the prosecution make plain the aims of sentence in such rare cases as this one are threefold: punishment, deterrence, and safeguarding. As I have said, I reject the submission that you are anxious for your safety at His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth. Dr. Wood concluded that you were not able to tolerate being an invisible man in that setting, and so acted to ensure you were noticed. Sending a message to an Iranian contact and remaining in the West London area until you were apprehended indicates some kind of plan was in place. At the very least, even then, you hoped for some response from your handlers. Whatever you had hoped would happen was frustrated by your arrest following a widespread and intensive police operation. Your offence does not fall cleanly into either of the two categories of escapes considered in the authorities, as I have found you were not under personal pressure to escape, and nor were you assisted by outside associates to make the escape. To the author of the pre-sentence report, you expressed regret and remorse, while not giving any further details of what you had shared with the Iranians. You insisted that throughout you had no nefarious intent. The officer formed the view that with greater maturity you are developing a more critical account of your behaviour. One of the things you regretted was the degree of public concern, as reflected in the media after your escape. This indicates, of course, that you had little understanding of the impact on others of your conduct at the time. You must continue to work on developing self-awareness now you have lost the career you were showing some promise for. You are to be sentenced as an adult, having been convicted at the age of 23, and although your offending began when you were 17, you persisted in it for a considerable period. That said, an older man committing the offences you have been found guilty of would face a noticeably longer sentence. Your previous offending history is minimal. You were involved in incidents of shoplifting aged 15 and fare evasion aged 20. On count 2, I must pass a special sentence for an offender of particular concern pursuant to section 278 of the Sentencing Act 2020. Stand up, Daniel Khalife. When you joined the army as a young man, you had the makings of an exemplary soldier. However, through the repeated violation of your oath of service, you showed yourself to be instead a dangerous fool. The only sentence open to me is one of immediate custody. Anyone who is prepared to betray his country and subject serving soldiers to an increased risk of harm must be punished. In respect of deterrence, the Court observes that advances in gathering and storing information means that those like you in relatively junior positions often have access to a precious and substantial repository of sensitive material which could endanger the security of the state. Alongside, the ability of individuals to communicate across borders via encrypted and auto-deleting social media platforms provide the means to rapidly pass on sensitive material in breach of trust without obvious physical risk to themselves. Preventing, detecting and exposing such conduct is difficult. The armed forces operate on trust, which it is the responsibility of each soldier to honour. That is why, when rarely breaches such as in this case are found, weighty punishment must follow. I must reflect a series of disclosures within the ambit of a single offence contrary to Section 1 of the Official Secrets Act, each of which could have been charged separately, attracting consecutive sentences. Similarly, for count 2, obtaining the full name of one Special Forces soldier would have been an offence, and you obtained 7. Consecutive sentences are justified because the list of protected personnel is, in my judgment, the most significant material you specially accessed for the purpose of sending to Iran. Had you begun your 2-year relationship with an enemy state aged 18, my starting point after trial on count 1 would have been 8 years, and on count 2, 7 years consecutive. I reduced those terms for your age and the circumstances I have described at the start. The sentence for escape must also be a consecutive sentence. I make some reduction for totality, which means that I have looked at the total sentence I impose to ensure that the individual components are adjusted to produce a fair and proportionate term overall. For committing an act prejudicial to the safety or interests of the state, the sentence is 6 years imprisonment. For eliciting information about members of the armed forces, the sentence is 6 years consecutive, consisting of a custodial term of 5 years and a further period of 1 year when you will be subject to licence. For escape, the sentence is 2 years, 3 months imprisonment consecutive. A discount of approximately 5% has been made for the late admission to that offence. You are subject to the notification requirements in Part 4 of the Counter-Terrorism Act 2008 for 15 years. I impose the surcharge. It is a matter for the prison authorities, but the various statutory regimes regulating early release mean the sentences will be served in order as follows. First, you will serve half the sentence for the Official Secrets Act offence. Then you will serve 40% of the sentence for escape. Finally, you will serve 2/3 of the custodial term for the Terrorism Act offence before your case will be referred to the Parole Board for consideration of whether you should be released before the expiry of the total of the custodial terms. The total sentence is therefore 14 years and 3 months.